Hi everyone, I'm Sylvia Day. I'm author of the Crossfire series and many others that hopefully you've read and enjoyed. Everybody asks me, how do you, what is your writing day like? How is your writing setup? What things do you need? For me, I can write anywhere, and that's really a blessing because I'm on the road 6 months out of the year. So if I only could write in one particular place, I'd be in really big trouble. I'd only write half the year. So I can write on a plane, I can write in Starbucks, I can write in the back of a car. My favorite place to write, of course, is at my desk at home, but I can make do without it. Things that I need around me are coffee, absolutely as much coffee as I can possibly stand. I have Nespresso machines and Keurigs pretty much all over the place. It's kind of like turn a corner and there's a coffee maker because I have to have coffee all day. I pretty much drink coffee until 6 o'clock at night, and that's, that really helps me keep going. The other thing is, and my sister tells me not to tell people this for some reason, but I have to have double extra hot flaming Cheetos. That's a plus, and I go to signings now and people bring them to me, and that's fine. You can bring me as many flaming hot Cheetos as you like. They're very, very hot, so if you start to find that you're running out of things to say, that will wake you right up. The other thing is chocolate, and no, you don't have to bring me chocolate because I get tons of chocolate, but no, you can bring me chocolate, that's fine. Love chocolate, so chocolate, coffee, flaming hot Cheetos, and just a flat surface for my computer, and I can write anywhere. The easiest novel for me to write was The Stranger I Married, and that book took me 4 weeks from beginning to end, and when I turned it into the editor, she called me up and said, do not change a word. So I had no edits, I had very minimal copy edits. It was literally a book that wrote itself, and it remains one of my personal favorites. It turned out to be a reader favorite too, which is good because sometimes the things that we think are the best are not the ones that resonate with readers as much, but The Stranger I Married was, and it remains a favorite of mine, and one of those things I look back on to say, look, I did at one time write a book in 4 weeks. It's pretty much unusual. The hardest book for me to write was Pride and Pleasure, which is set in the same world as The Stranger I Married, so you would think that would be as easy to write as that one was. It was not. It took me over a year to write, and in the case of that book, I got halfway through it, literally halfway through it, and the book stopped working. And I couldn't figure out why. I sat and stared at it for well over 6 months, and I ended up calling my editor and saying, I don't know, maybe I'm not supposed to write this book. I know you're waiting for it, and I know that it's halfway done, but it's just not happening. And she told me to take a couple weeks off and really think about it, so I did. I took a couple weeks off, and I started reading other things, other books, kind of re-immersing myself in just being a reader. And as I did that, it came to me that the hero said, why this book isn't working is because I don't like this heroine, and it's never going to work out between me and her. And if you want to get to a happily ever after, you're going to have to hook me up with somebody else. So I had to throw out the whole first 200 pages of that. I was able to salvage the first chapter. I gave him a new heroine who he fell madly in love with, and the rest of the book wrote itself in a very short amount of time, but it took me a year to get there. If I find that I'm uninspired with a particular story that I'm writing, usually what ends up happening, we call that writer's block. For me, I have found, thankfully, after 10 years of being a writer, that the reason why I hit writer's block is because I call it author intrusion. That's a point in the story where I started writing it in a direction that I felt that it should go, and it's not the direction that the characters feel that it should go, and they stop working with me. It's their story, they want to tell it the way it is, and I'm not listening to them, so they're not going to talk to me anymore. I'll have to go back. Usually I start at the beginning of the story, and I'll read through it and try to figure out the point where I intruded and tried to force it in a different direction. And it becomes fairly obvious when I go back and look at it from that perspective. At what point did you start telling your story instead of the character's story? And then I have to cut from that point. So, I usually end up praying that it was recent and not too early in the book, because that means that, I'm losing a huge chunk of it. But I'll go back and figure out that point where I intruded, cut it out, let the story flow in the way it's supposed to, and then it'll start writing itself. But that was a hard lesson to learn, to realize, like in the case of Pride and Pleasure, that I inserted a heroine in the story that I thought should be there, and the hero absolutely disagreed with me, and And, he kind of stormed off to his trailer like a movie star and said, I'm not coming back on set until you get me a new heroine. So I did. And that, for me, is really the point where I lose inspiration. My number one advice to aspiring writers is to write 3 novels before you think about publication. I understand exactly what it feels like to finish a book. It's extremely hard. I think 99.9% of the people in the world will tell you that they want to write a book or have thought about writing a book. It's a very common thing to hear, especially when you tell people that you're a writer. You'll hear somebody say, oh yeah, I'm going to write a book someday. It's extremely difficult to do. Most people will not do it. They will not get to the end of the book. So if you do get to the end of your first book, congratulations to you. It's a feat, it's a huge accomplishment, and you should celebrate that as much as possible. But you should not be in a rush to publish that book just because you got to the end of it. You don't know who you are as a writer. You don't know what your strengths are, your weaknesses are. You don't know how long it's going to take you to write a book. And you're not even sure at that point if you're going to stick with that genre. A lot of writers will tell you that they started writing a particular thing, and then they realize later on that what they wanted to write was something very different. For example, they may start with a mystery and then end up deciding that they want to write science fiction. That's part of the learning process, the growing process of being a writer. So you write that first book and you take it as a learning experience. That doesn't mean you're not going to end up selling it someday, that it won't be available for publication. The very first book I wrote was eventually published. I'm extremely glad it was not the first thing that was published. I had time to work on it later on and change it and make it better. And that's really what you have to look at it as. It's a stepping stone. It is not the end of the journey. You need to sit down and write that second book, and that's harder. Writing the second book, finishing the second book is much harder than writing the first one. We call that the sophomore slump. You will find it extremely difficult to finish the second book. But once you do, yay, it's a huge accomplishment. You should celebrate that as much as possible. Celebrate everything. I mean, it's very hard to be a writer. So you celebrate all of those little successes that you have. And then sit down and write the third book. By the time you write the third book, you're going to know what your strengths are. Maybe you're really good at dialogue. Maybe you're really good at introspection. Maybe you're really good at that, hooking chapter ender that makes people want to flip and start the next chapter, even though they really should go to bed. You will find out what those strengths are, and you're going to apply that in your third book in a way that you couldn't in the first and second book. When you get to that third book, you will be able to sit back and go, you know what, I'm really good at this. I really like writing this. I know how long it's going to take me to finish this. And then at that point, you can talk about, is it time to publish? Today's publishing market is very different from when I started because, you can publish anything. And Nora Roberts said once that anyone can publish a book, not everyone can write a book. If you want to be a published author, you need to be a writer first. And once you are a writer, then you can be a published author. Wow, okay. My top moment as a writer in the last 12 months is the last time I finished a book. I tell you, there's nothing else in the world like finishing a book. It is euphoric, and really, I think that's the reason why we writers stick with writing is because we get used to that high, and we want to reach it again. It makes the struggle and the pain of actually getting to that end point all worthwhile. For me, finishing a book is the very best thing. And for me, finishing a book is not necessarily writing the last word in the page. It's when I'm done completely editing it and polishing it, and when I look at it and say, this is absolutely the best book that I could have possibly written at this time. And that, for me, is absolutely fabulous. I am lucky that I've had that happen in the last 12 months, and that is absolutely the best thing that's happened to me as a writer in the last 12 months is finishing that book.